Welcome back to 15th Street Automotive. This morning's vehicle is a 2005 Chrysler Town & Country. Customer states she has a check engine light. So we're going to scan this thing and figure out what the problem is. So we got the scanner hooked up and we have a P0420 Catalyst Bank 1 efficiency problem. Let's go drive this thing and see if we can see anything obvious. Engine's still cold, so we need to warm everything up and see what the catalytic converter's doing. We're going to start by doing a oxygen sensor differential test. Basically, we're going to be watching the front oxygen sensor in relationship to the rear oxygen sensor and see what's happening in between. Alright, so we've been driving this thing for about 5 minutes. Temperature is all up to normal. What you're seeing on the scanner there is the graph on the left is the front oxygen sensor. That's the one that's reading the oxygen content of the exhaust out of the engine. The graph on the right is the oxygen sensor, same style oxygen sensor. But it's reading the oxygen content coming out of the catalytic converter. What we want to see is a steady graph, no fluctuations, no up and down fluctuations like you see on the left. We want to see a relatively steady graph on this style meter, probably about 3.2 volts. As you can see, it kind of fluctuates there about 3.2, and then it'll drop down a couple times, and then it'll fluctuate, or it'll steady out, and it'll fluctuate. If you look on the center of the right graph, on the center of that, it's got that nice line right there, about 3.2 volts. That's what we should see all the time. What that was me coming up to a stop and having to take my foot off the accelerator. So what that graph on the right is telling me is that this catalytic converter can work just fine, fully warmed up at idle, but it's not strong enough to clean up the exhaust or to store oxygen rather at anything more than an idle. So as soon as you step on the gas, that oxygen sensor is showing that the oxygen storage capability of that catalytic converter is not sufficient. So chances are this thing's going to require a catalytic converter. We're going to check and make sure that there's no issues that would have damaged that catalytic converter. I saw in the history before I drove this thing is that we did a tune-up on it about a year ago. The tune-up parts seem to be functioning properly, so it's probably not a tune-up issue, but we'll check, make sure that there's not any coolant in the combustion chamber, head gasket possibly. Make sure that's all good. If that's all good, if there's no other issues, I'm going to do a temperature test for you, just to kind of show you how we do that temperature test. And then if that's all good, then we're going to replace that catalytic converter. Alright, so under the hood here, all the tune-up parts are new. Thing runs really good. There's no misfires at all, so chances are it's not a misfire causing the problem. We want to check the cooling system for combustible gases. So what that tells us is there's CO2 in the cooling system. We clear it out, and we test again. So we're going to run this thing for about 10 more minutes, let it heat back up, and then we're going to check it again, make sure that we don't have a head gasket leak. Head gasket will destroy that catalytic converter really fast, so we want to make sure that we don't have a head gasket leak on this thing before we put an expensive catalytic converter on here. Had the thing running for about 10 minutes, got it re-warmed up, shut it back off, open the cap, and it's just in that 10 minutes it built up quite a bit of pressure, so I'm concerned that we have a head gasket problem. So, see, we don't even get close and we get a hit. We clear it out, bring it back in, and it picks it up immediately. And I can see it sitting here, it'll bubble up every once in a while. So what this is a CO2 detector, a CO2 gas detector, and it's picking up CO2, which is a combustible gas, or combustion gas. It's picking up CO2 in the cooling system. Only way CO2 is going to get into the cooling system is through the combustion chambers, a leak in the combustion chambers, and that also would indicate, that would also be the cause of a failed catalytic converter. So the fix for this one is going to have to be pulling those cylinder heads. When we pull them off, we send them up to the machine shop and they check them for cracks and make sure there's no other issues. But more than likely, we're going to either have warped heads or just a blown head gasket. No sense doing a catalytic converter until we can make sure that it's not going to fail again. So we'll replace the head gaskets and we will replace the catalytic converter.